Now, if you imagine the crop circles as being, let's say you have a simple circle, and you imagine these as actually being four-dimensional. In other words, it's like a ball, and this ball has penetrated the sphere, but all you can see is like the slice of an orange. When you cut an orange, all you see is a flattened shape. So if this thing has hit the ground, what you're going to get are little ripples, like throwing a rock into a pond, if you like. You get the little ripples of water. And again, these ripples are detectable by dowsing equipment or highly sensitive electromagnetic equipment. When you actually measure the ripples and plot them on a computer, you find that there's a relationship. And this relationship from the physical design to the ripples is based on very basic geometric principles, and geometric principles are fixed ratios. You can't alter them. They're either right or they're wrong. And every single time when you get this physical crop circle, you get the ripples going out, and each one of those ripples is placed exactly, and I mean exactly, where the geometry fits relative to the physical design, almost showing that there's a harmonic which is being set up when this object is hitting the earth plane.
Perhaps the design that you actually see on the ground in the grain is simply a footprint of the complexity of the energy fields that comprise it. And in fact, there may well be as much design invisible in the air above the ground as there is underneath, as though the entire feature were a bisected orange. And the segmented pattern of the orange is what you see in the grain.
I'm going to just call it an energy system that is low to the crop and focused. Levengood says that a spinning plasma vortex with microwave and other energies is involved. Well, both of these men, I think, would say plasma is involved. And what is plasma? Plasma is where you strip electrons and ions in the presence of electromagnetic fields. Now, we're still in the area of energy.
Many, many thousands of years ago, there was a lot of cultures that were here on the planet. One of the legacies that they left us were these impressive monuments like Stonehenge, Avery Stone Circle, and the thousands and thousands of standing stones and tumuli, long barrows and giants' graves that we see predominantly in England, and southern England in particular, but also in America with the mounds, which are very, very sacred. We've since found that all these locations have one great big thing in common, and that is that they all stand at the crossroads of these invisible energy lines which crisscross the planet. So no wonder that people, when they go to these places, they feel something special inside them. It's as if they have a heightened sense of awareness, a connectedness to the land, and they feel spiritually uplifted.
The theory is that this particular part of southern England, the Avery and the Stonehenge, the Silbury Hill, this whole complex is a very, very critical energy juncture on the planet where some primary energy lines are intersecting, and this is why the ancient people built these stone sites here, because they knew about how the earth and the living earth relates to the sky and relates to the human consciousness as an interactive whole. So they made these particular intersections into sacred places by maybe putting these stone circles here and these monuments here to maybe trap the energy to use it for their own spiritual or whatever purposes.
These sites have been around for thousands of years, and they serve their purpose, and they mark the points on the energy grid. And then along came the different churches, and they erected churches on top of the same sites. In some cases, they actually built them to the same dimensions as the actual sacred sites that they supplemented.
If you consider the Earth a living entity with energy meridians all crisscrossing like in some kind of grid over the whole planet, much like we do, the Chinese acupuncture, the same principle, with these energy lines, and if you have a problem, stick a pin in it, it will do something to that particular energy line to free it up.
When we start looking at how people sort of find different heightened senses of awareness when they go into churches too, and they have a greater connection with God, we begin to see that there's something here that's going on. And when you look at the names that the church gives to its elements, for example, the altar, it's not done by mistake. I mean, an altar is there to alter you. The nave is also interesting because the nave comes from the Latin, the navis, which is a boat, and the boat takes you from one place to the altar. You are carried, and the place where you are carried to the altar is called an entrance. And you'll find that when you actually douse the entrances of churches, that they actually have these spirals of energy that come up from the ground. So no wonder you're entranced. You put in a level of awareness and receptivity that allows you to go to a place where you are altered. Now, This moving things forward another few thousand years, we start getting the development of Gothic cathedrals built by the Freemasons, people who had a lot of knowledge which stems back to ancient Egypt and perhaps before that. And they encoded into these great sermons of stone a lot of harmonics, basically to do with sacred geometry. You take the buildings apart, and there's a lot of geometric elements encoded into them. And we also know that geometry is also a form of communication. In effect, if you put patients who are schizophrenic into trapezoidal-shaped wards, they actually recover. So geometry has an effect on the human body as well, and its brainwave patterns. So another couple of hundred years later, up come crop circles. And we now find that the crop circles are occupying the same crossing points of energy that are shared by either the churches, the sacred sites, Stonehenge, any sacred site around the world. But the more interesting thing is that when the crop circle appears on the crossing point of these energies, is that it sets out this energy pattern which actually influences the local sacred sites and alters what's already there. So consequently, people who go into crop circles or a local church or a tumuli or a sacred site feel a sense of awareness, of elatedness, or something that's sort of interacting with their body. So it's not by chance that these things are happening. These things are imprinting an energy into the ground, into the whole system of the earth, and it's changing its own organic systems, if you like.
The mathematics and the geometry of a large proportion of the real crop circle is essentially natural geometry. You know, this stuff is present in nature. You know, a snowflake or our own DNA, they're mathematical designs, but they're inherent in nature, which means they're inherently spiritual, you know, so it just seems very fitting. Again, it relates the whole situation to the land, to us, to our consciousness, and to the sky, you know, to whatever's really out there.
Music leaves an imprint when you actually put it into certain mediums, and this again is proven in cymatic theory, where you take a note or a human voice, and if you project that note into, say, a membrane containing powder or a liquid, you can actually photograph a geometric pattern, which now starts taking us into the area of the Hindu mandalas, those very complex geometric shapes, which the Hindus always claim were used to heighten your sense of awareness.
We started to pick up these strange sounds that were being emitted, and each formation seemed to have its own distinct signature in a tone. A lot of these were in the alpha and beta range, and a friend of mine who's a musician said, you know, I'm sure you've got some music there. Well, he didn't have the slightest interest in crop circles, but was very much a musician. So he designed some computer software which enabled us to put the sounds into a computer, couple them up with a MIDI interface and then into a synthesizer, and we found that these, what sounded really strange sounds, started to produce and generate music, which was very relaxing, very beautiful.
So therefore, if crop circles are creations of sound, which recent research seems to suggest that they are, that when you throw a sound into a physical medium, you get a geometric shape with harmonic patterns all over it, that these things are having an imprint not only on the earth, but also on the people who enter their space.
About 1996, I looked at these designs, you know, I was like, bloody wow, you know, this is unbelievable. You know, these are like hugely sophisticated mathematics, like laid out over 700, 800, 900 foot across cornfields, you know, like, Jesus, I couldn't draw that stuff on a piece of paper with a desk lamp in, you know, in perfect condition.
Suddenly in 90, just down the road in Eastfield at Alton Barnes, there was this amazing pictogram, so breathtaking that it landed on the covers of the British papers, and I immediately said, I'm down there. And I think it's part of the long cultural educational program. And at the end of the 80s, I think it was decided by the authors of this program that dumb earthlings were ready to be kicked up one class into a higher level of form. And that was the first event, the second chapter.
The 1991 Barbary Castle formation, to me, was possibly my most favourite. But also it holds everything in that shape. The tetrahedral mathematical symbols are in there. It depicts the notes, the basic notes of music. So everything was encompassed in that one formation, and it was a great pity that a lot of people never got in to see it.
And it was powerful too, wasn't it?
Very powerful. I mean, the energies both for dowsing. I mean, I do dowse, but even just using my hands as I was walking along there, the hairs were standing up on my arms. It was tremendous feeling. And what I felt was it was a very positive energy, because I came out of there, I'd driven up from Dorset at 5 o'clock in the morning, bit sleepy, probably shouldn't have been driving, got there, and I felt immediate upliftment. You know, it was almost as if I'd had 3 gin and tonics, you know, beautiful feeling, came out of that formation incredibly well.
The grain itself is shiny on the top from the forces that have struck it down, and it's oddly troubling to walk against the lie of the fallen plants. You get the feeling somehow that you're moving against the energy forces in your life. You can reverse the feeling by turning around and walking with the lie of the plants. It's a very odd sensation.
So the next level is it entirely natural? And if it's entirely natural, why didn't it show up globally before 1991? And if it's not natural, what intelligence is manipulating possibly natural energies to make cereal crops of the world, which are like a skin when they're growing? It is kind of like a large skin, to interact with that skin in patterns that seem to have mathematical similarities from some formations that seem to suggest knowledge about ancient pasts.
I know of one credible person which has seen a formation being made, and that's actually a good friend of mine who lives in Devon. I just called her up and said, you know, this is really pretty amazing stuff, come over and just have a look for yourself. So she came up, and on her very first night, she sat on top of a high point in the neighbourhood, which is called Adam's Grave. It's just a burial mound on near Alton Barnes.
We were up there last night.
Pretty amazing spot, isn't it?
Yeah.
She essentially, for 4 hours, to start with, she saw a large globe of light about the size of the moon come across the land parallel with the ground, stop over a cornfield, split into 3, and go about for 4 hours in a fairly purposeful but very obvious, and this is a brightly lit full moon, so it's very clear. And, you know, she saw these lights just more or less sweeping the crop down.
The interesting thing, the night before, the surrounding villages, there was a total power cut. And lots of, you know, people around there had seen these strange balls of light over the top of Barbary Castle. And so in some ways it wasn't a surprise to me that a formation had appeared there during the night.
In the crop formations, the lights that have been seen, I think the ones that have been videotaped certainly would fall into the category of motion that has this kind of a, I don't know if I want to say a wave, but it has this kind of a feeling to it, slight undulation and sort of languid, even if it's moving rapidly.
The balls of light are fascinating, and it's one of the biggest undercurrents of the crop circle phenomenon, if not entire folklore of this area. In fact, there's a hill called Golden Ball Hill, which is not too far from here, and it's so called because the local folklore has it that so many balls of light are seen floating around the area, almost like the will-o'-the-wisp or fairies, if you like. It's the same sort of luminosity. But there are a lot of very funny incidences with balls of light associated with crop circles, other than the fact that they've actually been filmed emerging out of them. There was one case when I was flying with my pilot, and we take these little microlights, which is these tiny little sort of single double-seater airplanes with a little engine strapped to your back. And we're talking about balls of light, and they were saying, well, I don't really believe that this exists. I mean, how can these balls of light exist? And at that very moment, one of them flew right past us, just couldn't have been more than 100 feet just below us, and it was just like a cartoon. The two of us just went, and we were saying, follow that light. So I'm out of